My boyfriend told me to leave if I didn't like his 37 household rules. So I took everything I'd paid for and left him with the rules. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 29 years old, and yesterday I moved out of the apartment I shared with my boyfriend. I took everything that belonged to me, which, as it turned out, was almost everything. The couch, dining table, television, bed frame, most of the kitchen appliances, even the bathroom towels had all been bought by me. When I finished loading the truck, the apartment looked less like a home and more like an abandoned movie set. The only things left behind were Adrian's clothes, his personal belongings, his expensive blender, and one laminated sheet still taped neatly to the refrigerator. It was his list of 37 household rules. I'd counted them more than once over the years. Adrian was 31, and we'd been together for 4 years, living under the same roof for the last 2. In the beginning, he didn't seem controlling. Looking back, I think that's because his need for order arrived so gradually that I mistook it for thoughtfulness. He remembered exactly how I liked my coffee. He kept painkillers in his car because I sometimes came home with headaches after long days at work. Whenever I got sick, he made soup and stayed beside me until I fell asleep. "We balance each other," he used to tell me. "You stop me from becoming boring. And you stop me from losing my keys," I'd joke. Back then, his obsession with organization seemed almost charming. The first rule appeared a few weeks after we moved in. "No shoes past the entryway," he said, pointing at the new rug. "That's reasonable," I agreed. Then came washing dishes immediately after every meal. Still reasonable. After that, towels had to be folded a certain way, groceries arranged in designated sections of the refrigerator, and laundry removed from the dryer within 15 minutes. At first, Adrian presented everything as teamwork. "We're building good habits," he liked to say. Or, "I just want our home to feel peaceful." Little by little, suggestions became expectations. Expectations became rules. Before I realized it, our refrigerator displayed a printed document titled Household Guidelines for a Healthy Shared Life, complete with bold headings and numbered categories. I remember staring at it with my work bag still over my shoulder. "You actually printed this?" He smiled proudly. "It'll make life easier. No confusion. No unnecessary arguments." The list started innocently enough. No guests without discussing it first. No eating outside the kitchen. Any purchase over $20 required mutual approval, mandatory couple time every evening, without phones or television. There was even a shower schedule. He claimed the mornings, while I was assigned evenings. "Assigned?" I asked. "It's practical," he replied. "We won't get in each other's way." "Adrian, we have one bathroom, not airport runways." His smile disappeared. "You always joke when I'm trying to improve our life." That sentence became one of his favorite ways to shut down any disagreement. Whenever I questioned him, I wasn't expressing an opinion. I was resisting growth. If I admitted I felt uncomfortable, I was being defensive. If I wanted time alone, I was emotionally unavailable. Eventually, arguing felt pointless, so I stopped. Meanwhile, I was the one paying nearly 3/4 of our living expenses. My job in information technology covered the rent, utilities, groceries, internet, insurance, and most nights we ate out. Adrian worked as a social media consultant, managing a few small business accounts. His income covered some personal expenses, but nowhere near the lifestyle he enjoyed. Yoga memberships, new clothes, expensive brunches, skincare subscriptions, and impulsive shopping trips somehow always found their way onto my credit card. Even so, I was expected to ask Adrian before buying anything that cost more than $20. One Friday, after an exhausting week at work, I wanted to buy a $25 game. He glanced at my screen and frowned. "Do you really need it? It's only $5 over the limit." "That's not the issue." "Then what is?" "It's about discipline." Ironically, that same week, he bought himself a $200 leather bag. When I reminded him of his own rule, he dismissed it without hesitation. "That's different." "How?" "It's a personal purchase." "So was mine." He let out an impatient sigh. "Evelyn, I created the system. I know when exceptions make sense." Looking back, that should have been enough to tell me everything. The rules were never meant for both of us. They existed to manage my behavior while giving him complete freedom to ignore them whenever it suited him. The double standards showed up everywhere. His best friend could stay drinking wine in our living room until late on a Tuesday, but if one of my coworkers wanted to stop by after work, Adrian said it would interfere with our scheduled couple time. He regularly snacked on the couch, yet if I carried a cup of tea into the bedroom, he silently pointed me back toward the kitchen. He canceled our weekly relationship meetings whenever he wasn't in the mood, but if I asked to postpone one, I was accused of avoiding accountability. Those meetings eventually became something I dreaded. Every week, we sat across from each other at the dining table while Adrian reviewed a page of notes he'd written about everything I was supposedly doing wrong. My attitude, my time management, my spending habits, even the way I withdrew whenever I felt criticized, all became topics for discussion. One evening, I decided to bring my own list. "I feel like these rules only apply to me," I said. He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and shook his head. "This is exactly the problem." "What problem?" "You turn constructive feedback into criticism." "I'm giving you feedback too." "No," he replied calmly. "You're deflecting." By the end of the conversation, I was the one apologizing. I still hate admitting that. 3 days before I moved out, everything finally unraveled over something as ordinary as dinner. I'd worked late, skipped lunch, and drove home exhausted with a pounding headache. On the way, I picked up a large pepperoni pizza because I didn't have the energy to cook. The moment I opened the box, Adrian walked into the kitchen and stopped. "What is that?" "Dinner." His face tightened. "You didn't follow the meal plan." I was hungry. "Tuesday was supposed to be salmon." "We don't have any." "Because you were supposed to buy groceries yesterday." "I worked late." "You should have planned better." I looked at him in disbelief. "You were home most of the day." The atmosphere changed instantly. His expression hardened, and I knew exactly where the conversation was headed. "You think working from home means I do nothing?" he snapped. "That's not what I said." "It's exactly what you meant. I said you were home. You could have picked up the salmon." His voice immediately rose. "This isn't about salmon, Evelyn. It's about respect." "No," I shot back. "It's about pizza. It's about you ignoring every system I've put in place. I bought dinner because I was hungry. You destroyed the plan." I was too exhausted to argue carefully anymore. Not everything has to be run like a project. His expression hardened. "That's exactly why your life would fall apart without me." Something inside me went completely quiet. For 2 years, I'd been tiptoeing through my own home, always worried that one wrong move would start another lecture. I asked before spending my own money, before inviting friends over, even before doing something as simple as showering outside the schedule he'd created. I was paying most of the bills, yet somehow I felt like a guest in the life I was financing. Adrian pointed toward the hallway. "If you don't like my rules, leave." He expected me to argue, maybe cry, eventually apologize like I always had. Instead, I closed the pizza box and looked him straight in the eye. "Okay." He laughed, certain he'd won. "You wouldn't last a week without me keeping your life together." I didn't answer. I carried the pizza into the bedroom, ate in silence, and climbed into bed without another word. Adrian assumed the fight was over. He thought I'd cool down overnight and apologize in the morning. What he didn't know was that while he slept beside me, I was lying awake, making a very different kind of list. Not rules this time, but everything I'd paid for, everything that legally belonged to me, and every account I needed to separate before I walked away. The strange part was that I wasn't losing sleep because of the decision. The next morning, I got up first and made myself a cup of coffee simply because I wanted one, not because it was my turn or because some schedule on the refrigerator told me to. Adrian wandered into the kitchen, looking completely relaxed. "I knew you'd cool off," he said as he poured himself a cup. "We'll talk tonight during couple time." I forced a small smile. "I have work today." "So do I." He kissed my forehead, grabbed his gym bag, and headed out for his usual Wednesday routine: yoga, brunch with friends, then grocery shopping according to his carefully planned meal schedule. He never noticed me watching from the window until his car disappeared around the corner. The moment it did, I picked up my phone. "Hi, I'd like to rent the smallest U-Haul you have available today." Within an hour, I'd taken the day off, rented the truck, and returned to the apartment with packing tape, moving boxes, and a notebook. I worked room by room, checking every purchase against my receipts. The sectional, coffee table, television, game console, bookshelves, dining set, air fryer, coffee maker, stand mixer, microwave, bed frame, mattress, nightstands, towels, bathroom shelves, even the hairdryer. All of it had been purchased with my money. Every receipt and warranty was in my name. As the rooms emptied, the apartment echoed in a way I'd never noticed before. Strangely, it didn't feel like I was dismantling my life. It felt like I was finally taking it back. The emptier the apartment became, the lighter I felt. It no longer felt like I was leaving my home. It felt like I was finally breathing again. Around noon, my younger sister called. "You sound different," she said the moment I answered. "I'm moving out." She paused for a second. "What happened?" I looked around at the half-empty apartment before answering. "Nothing happened today. That's exactly the problem. This has been happening for 2 years." She stayed quiet while I told her everything. The printed rule sheet on the refrigerator, having to ask before spending my own money, scheduled shower times, and the weekly meetings where Adrian reviewed all the ways I supposedly needed to improve. When I finished, she let out a slow breath. "Evelyn, I've wanted to say something for months." "What?" "I stopped recognizing you." That hit harder than I expected because it was true. "You used to laugh all the time," she continued. "Lately, it feels like you're always asking permission just to exist." I sealed another moving box and nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I know. I figured if I said anything, you'd defend him." "I probably would have." Her voice softened. "I'm proud of you." Those 4 words nearly broke me. Not because I still questioned my decision, but because I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to tell me I wasn't imagining everything. By mid-afternoon, the truck was almost full. Adrian's clothes, laptop, camera gear, his favorite blender, and the laminated list of 37 rules were the only things left in the apartment. I stared at the list for a moment before sticking a small yellow note beside it. "Per your request, I've left. Rent is due on the 1st. Good luck." That was all. No insults. No accusations. Just the truth. I locked the door behind me and walked away without looking back. The drive to Thomas's apartment felt strangely unreal. At every red light, I expected my phone to ring, and at every intersection, I wondered if I'd suddenly lose my nerve and turn around. I never did. Thomas helped me unload everything into his spare room. Looking at the stack of furniture and boxes, he laughed. You really did take almost the whole apartment. I paid for almost the whole apartment. Fair enough. We ordered Chinese food and ate straight from the takeout containers while sitting on the floor. Adrian always hated that, insisting it looked lazy. That evening, those noodles tasted better than any carefully planned dinner we'd ever eaten together. Around 4:30, my phone exploded. By the time I picked it up, there were more than 60 text messages and nearly 30 missed calls. The first few sounded confused. Where are you? Did someone break in? Why is the TV gone? Where's the couch? Confusion quickly turned into anger. Bring everything back. You can't empty the apartment. This isn't funny. A few minutes later, panic took over. Why are the utilities being canceled? My card was declined. Why doesn't Netflix work? What happened to all the passwords? Before leaving, I'd changed every streaming password, removed him from my credit accounts, canceled the supplementary cards, transferred every subscription into my own name, and scheduled the utilities to end with the current billing cycle. None of it was revenge. I was simply separating my finances from someone I no longer lived with. Eventually, I answered one of his calls. Evelyn, he shouted, what have you done? You told me to leave. Not like this. You didn't tell me how. You took everything. I took what I paid for. You've ruined my life. I let the silence sit for a moment before answering. You spent years telling me I couldn't function without you. I finally believed you were wrong. His voice softened immediately. Come back. No. We're throwing away 4 years over one fight. It stopped being one fight a long time ago. What does that even mean? It means I've been living by your rules for 2 years. There was a long pause before he tried one last angle. You owe me a conversation. I don't owe you anything. I ended the call. 5 minutes later, his mother called instead. Evelyn, sweetheart, she began gently. I'm sure Adrian didn't mean what he said. I think he meant every word. He loves you. I looked around Thomas's apartment, surrounded by the life I'd just reclaimed. People who love each other don't make each other ask for permission. She hesitated. He's devastated. So was I. I just stayed quiet about it for 2 years. Not long after, messages started arriving from his older sister, his cousin, and several mutual friends, all asking me to come back and give him another chance. Then his best friend reached out. Every message said the same thing in a different way. I was overreacting, I should come home, and Adrian deserved another chance. I replied to all of them with the exact same sentence. He told me to leave. I left. Just before midnight, Adrian sent one final text. I can't afford this apartment without you. I stared at the screen for a long time. All day he'd insisted I was being unreasonable, but that single message revealed what was really bothering him. He didn't say he missed me. He didn't apologize. He didn't admit he'd been wrong. He admitted he couldn't afford the life we'd built. That text answered every question I'd been asking myself. He wasn't trying to get me back because he'd realized my value. He was trying to recover the stability I'd quietly provided for years. The woman he'd spent 2 years managing was gone, and so was the comfortable life that came with her paycheck. The next morning felt strangely peaceful. That morning there wasn't a schedule waiting for me. No reminder about breakfast. No evening feedback session hanging over my head. The quiet felt unfamiliar at first, but it didn't take long to realize I'd missed it. Thomas had already left for work, so I made myself a coffee, opened my laptop, and started working from his dining table. Around 10, Adrian called again. I ignored the first call. Then the second. After the third, he sent a text. Can we please talk like adults? I looked at the message for a moment before replying. You told me to leave. His answer came back almost immediately. I was angry. I never thought you'd actually do it. I typed only 4 words. That's exactly the problem. A few minutes later, another message appeared. You don't end 4 years over one argument. I couldn't help shaking my head. To Adrian, everything had started with the pizza. He had forgotten the endless rules, the constant double standards, and 2 years of living by expectations that never applied to him. I answered honestly. It wasn't one argument. It was 2 years of living by your rules. He called again. This time I answered. Evelyn, his voice sounded exhausted. You've made your point. My point? You embarrassed me. I laughed before I could stop myself. I embarrassed you? My landlord thinks I'm irresponsible. You're not even on the lease. My credit cards keep getting declined. The supplementary cards, they were linked to my account. You canceled them. Of course I did. He let out a frustrated sigh. You didn't have to humiliate me. I wasn't trying to humiliate you. You took everything. I took everything I bought. You could have left something. I did. What? Your clothes and your blender. Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its anger. I don't understand why you're being so cruel. After the call ended, that word stayed with me. Cruel. For a long time, I'd confused setting boundaries with hurting someone. Walking away wasn't cruel. Spending years convincing someone they needed your permission to live their own life was. Around lunchtime, another message arrived. This one wasn't from Adrian. It was from Ryan, his best friend. Can we talk? I hesitated, then agreed to meet him at a nearby coffee shop. Ryan looked uncomfortable the moment he sat down. I probably shouldn't be here. Then why are you? He rubbed the back of his neck before answering. Because I don't think you've been told the whole truth. My stomach tightened. What don't I know? Ryan hesitated before answering. You remember Adrian talking about starting a relationship coaching business? I nodded. He'd mentioned it a few times, usually in passing. I always assumed it was just another business idea about helping couples communicate better. Ryan looked down at his coffee. It was never really about helping couples. What do you mean? He talked about you all the time. I frowned. About what? For a second, I wasn't sure I'd heard him correctly. Ryan continued carefully. He used to tell people he'd taken someone who was disorganized and overly emotional and turned her into the perfect partner. I almost laughed at how completely detached that description was from reality. He wanted to use your relationship as the centerpiece of his business, Ryan said. You were supposed to be his success story. I stared at him. You're saying he talked about our relationship publicly? Ryan nodded. He even showed people that list of rules. What? He was proud of it. He thought it proved he knew how to build the perfect relationship. I looked out the cafe window, trying to process what I was hearing. Traffic rolled past as usual, people crossed the street carrying coffee, and somehow the ordinary world outside made the conversation feel even more surreal. Ryan lowered his voice. I honestly thought you knew. I didn't. I remembered hearing that phrase once at home. I'd assumed it was another podcast or business article he'd been reading. Teaching people to run their relationships the way he ran ours? He called it leadership. I let out a quiet breath. In that moment, a lot of things finally made sense. The rules, the endless evaluations, the need to measure everything. It had never been just about us. He'd been testing a system he believed he could eventually sell. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. There's something else. I looked back at him. What? I probably shouldn't tell you. Ryan. He sighed. A few weeks ago, he said that once the coaching business took off, he was going to leave you. I didn't react. I just waited for him to finish. He said staying with you made him look credible. A long-term relationship would help people trust him enough to buy his courses. For the first time since walking out of that apartment, I understood that I had never been standing beside Adrian as an equal partner. I'd been standing inside his business plan. He said women would trust him more if they saw he'd been in a long-term relationship, Ryan said quietly. That was supposed to make him look credible. I stared at him. And after that? Ryan hesitated before answering. He joked that once the business took off, he'd finally find someone who matched his ambitions. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Finally, he sighed. I'm sorry, Evelyn. I looked down at my coffee. Strangely, I wasn't angry anymore. It still hurt, but the confusion I'd carried around for 2 years disappeared almost instantly. Every compromise had been mine. Every disagreement had somehow ended with me apologizing. Every sacrifice had been expected. I hadn't been building a future with Adrian. I had been helping him build one for himself. When I got back to Thomas's apartment, another envelope was waiting outside the door. There was no return address, but I already knew who had sent it. Inside was a neatly typed demand letter requesting 3 months of financial support, $6,000 for emotional damages, moving expenses, and the return of property he claimed we owned together. I read it twice before laughing out loud. Thomas walked in carrying groceries and looked at me. What's so funny? I handed him the letter. He skimmed the first page, raised an eyebrow, and shook his head. This can't be real. I was hoping you'd say that. You should still have someone look at it. My cousin worked as a paralegal, so I scanned the document and emailed it to him. Less than 20 minutes later, he called, already laughing. Please tell me this is a joke. It showed up outside the apartment. It looks like someone searched how to sue your ex and copied the first template they found. So I'm fine? More than fine. Just don't send him a penny. I wasn't planning to. That evening, Thomas came home with takeout and another piece of gossip. You know my girlfriend goes to the same yoga studio as Adrian? I nodded. Apparently, he's been telling people for weeks that once his coaching business took off, he was going to trade up and find someone more successful. I couldn't help smiling. Thomas looked confused. You okay? I think I finally understand what happened. What do you mean? I kept wondering if I could have saved the relationship. And? There was nothing to save. The relationship I'd been fighting for only existed in my head. To Adrian, I wasn't a lifelong partner. I was someone who paid the bills while helping him build the image he wanted to sell. It hurt, but it also removed the last bit of guilt I'd been carrying. The next morning, my phone buzzed with another notification. Adrian had uploaded a new video. Even before I opened it, the title told me exactly what he was about to do. When love becomes emotional abuse. I almost ignored it. Part of me didn't want to hear another version of reality rewritten to make him the victim. Curiosity won. The video opened with Adrian sitting alone in the apartment I'd emptied a few days earlier. I never thought I'd have to tell this story, he began. I rolled my eyes before he finished the sentence. According to Adrian, he had sacrificed everything for our relationship. I was the controlling one. I refused to work consistently, depended on him financially, hated structure, ignored responsibilities, and eventually abandoned him because he asked for basic respect. Listening to him, I had to admit one thing. If I hadn't lived through it myself, I probably would have believed him too. For the first few hours, it looked like everyone else did. The comments flooded in with sympathy, calling me toxic and telling Adrian he deserved better. I didn't bother replying. Arguing with strangers who only knew one side of the story was a waste of time. Lies can spread quickly, but the truth usually catches up. By mid-afternoon, Thomas called me into the living room. "You should see this." He handed me his phone. The mood online had changed. Someone had started digging through Adrian's old social media posts and comparing them with the story he was telling. Photos from expensive restaurants, vacations, furniture deliveries, birthday gifts, and new electronics all pointed to one inconvenient detail. They'd either been tagged from my account or openly credited to me. Within a few hours, the tone in the comments had completely changed. "I thought you said she didn't have a job. Who paid for your Italy trip? Didn't you thank your girlfriend for buying you that camera last year?" I remembered the camera immediately. It had been his birthday present. More people joined in, comparing old captions, archive stories, and timestamps. Someone even found a post showing Adrian using the supplementary credit card linked to my account, while another uncovered an old story where he'd thanked me for always spoiling him. No matter how many comments he deleted, new screenshots kept appearing somewhere else. Within hours, his own online history had dismantled the version of events he was trying so hard to sell. That same afternoon, I signed the lease for my new apartment. It wasn't extravagant, just a bright one-bedroom with hardwood floors and enough space to finally feel like mine again. As the property manager handed me the keys and congratulated me, I realized I hadn't felt that light in years. Driving away, I smiled the entire way home because every decision from that moment on belonged to me. That evening, I texted Adrian. "I'll be back Friday afternoon to collect the last of my things. Please be out of the apartment." His reply came almost instantly. "You don't get to tell me when to be in my own home. It isn't your lease. I've lived there for 2 years. As my guest." Seconds later, my phone rang. "What gives you the right?" he demanded. "You ended that conversation yourself." "I have rights." "So do I." "You can't throw me out." "I'm not. The landlord will decide what happens after Friday." He hung up without another word. Later that evening, Mr. Peterson called to let me know Adrian had immediately phoned him, insisting he had tenant rights. "I've been renting apartments for almost 30 years, Mr. Peterson said with a laugh. "And this is the first time someone's argued that organizing the kitchen makes them a legal tenant." I couldn't help laughing. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I just wanted you to know everything's documented." By Thursday morning, Adrian had completely changed tactics. The angry messages disappeared, replaced by flowers delivered to Thomas's apartment. There wasn't even a card, just a bouquet of white lilies, my favorite. Then the text started. "I've been thinking. You were right. The rules got out of hand. I'll change." By lunchtime, he was calling almost every hour. Eventually, I answered. "I've had time to think," he said quietly. "I understand why you left." I waited. I was trying too hard to create stability. "You were trying to control every part of my life." "I know." "No, Adrian, you still don't." He sighed. "I'll go to therapy." "I hope you do. We can fix this." "No." "I'll throw away the rules." "They were never the real problem." He sounded genuinely confused. "Then what was?" "The fact that you believed you had the right to make them." For a moment, he said nothing. Then he tried again. "I'll keep only a few." I couldn't help laughing. "You still don't hear yourself." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Please." "No." "I love you." I shook my head. "You loved managing me. Those aren't the same thing." "That's not fair." "For the first time it is." I ended the call. Thomas looked up from the kitchen. "Feel better?" "Much." He smiled knowingly. "You realize he's still trying to negotiate." Thomas was right. Listening to him, I realized every apology came with a condition. He wasn't trying to understand why I'd left. He was simply looking for the quickest way to get his old life back. By that evening, Adrian had moved from apologizing to bargaining. My phone filled with photos of him wearing outfits I'd once complimented, old vacation selfies, and pictures from our anniversary dinner. At the end came a single message. "Remember what you're giving up." I looked at the screen, then down at the key to my new apartment resting in my palm. Sunlight reflected off the silver key against the hardwood floor, so I snapped a quick picture and sent it back. "Already found something better." I didn't add another word. 2 hours later, he finally replied. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life?" A minute after that came another message. "I'm giving you one last chance. Come home tonight, or we're finished." I smiled. Even now, he still believed he was the one making the decision. I sent one final reply. "We were finished the moment you told me to leave." Then I blocked his number. The quiet that followed felt unfamiliar, but in the best possible way. No arguments waiting around the corner. No criticism disguised as advice. No wondering what I'd done wrong this time. For the first time in years, home felt like something I was moving toward instead of trying to survive. Friday afternoon arrived with clear skies. Thomas drove while our friend Marcus came along to help load the last few things. Neither of them talked much. They both understood this wasn't really about furniture. It was about closing the door on a part of my life that had already ended. Mr. Peterson was waiting in the lobby when we arrived. "I figured this might help," he said, handing me a spare key. "I'll stay downstairs in case you need anything." I thanked him, and the three of us headed upstairs. I expected to feel nervous walking back into the apartment. Instead, I felt nothing except relief that this would be the last time. The moment I opened the door, a stale smell hit us. Dirty dishes overflowed from the sink. Empty pizza boxes covered the counters. Laundry was scattered across the hallway. Trash was piled beside the kitchen bin, and a thin layer of dust had already settled where my furniture used to be. Marcus looked around in disbelief. I thought this guy was obsessed with keeping everything perfect. So did I. Then I spotted Adrian. He was sitting on the floor where our couch had once been, surrounded by apartment listings, loan applications, credit reports, and job postings. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair hadn't been washed in days, and the dark circles under his eyes made him look years older. He looked up as we walked in. "Happy now?" he asked quietly. "You ruined my life." I glanced around the apartment before answering. "No, Adrian, you did. You left. You told me to." "I didn't mean it." "But you still said it." He looked away. "I thought you'd fight for us." "I did for 2 years. His shoulders slumped. "I never wanted this." "You wanted obedience." "No. You wanted everything to happen your way." Thomas and Marcus quietly packed the remaining boxes while we talked, giving us enough space to finish a conversation that should have happened years earlier. "I'll throw away the list," Adrian said. "I'll never make another rule." I shook my head. "You're still missing the point." He looked at me helplessly. "Then tell me." "The list wasn't the real issue. Anyone can write rules. The problem was that you believed you had the authority to write them for another adult." He stood there without answering. After a long moment, he finally whispered, "I know I made mistakes." "You still think this started with a pizza?" He frowned. "It started the first time I apologized for questioning something that never should have needed your permission. Somewhere along the way, I stopped recognizing myself." This time, neither of us said anything else. There wasn't anything left to argue about. Marcus carried the last storage bin to the door while Thomas checked each room one final time. "That's everything," he said. I nodded and turned to leave. Behind us, Adrian suddenly stood. "Wait." We stopped. "I'll let your friends stay as late as they want," he said hurriedly. "You can eat in the living room. You don't have to ask before buying anything anymore." His voice cracked with every promise. I looked at him for a moment. "It was never about permission." He frowned. "Then what was it about?" "Respect." "I respected you." I shook my head. "No, you managed me." His shoulders dropped. "I thought I was helping." "I know. And that's why this is so sad." He looked at me, confused. "You honestly believed controlling someone was the same thing as loving them." His eyes filled with tears. "Evelyn." I stepped closer, not to comfort him, but to make sure he heard every word. A relationship only works when both people are allowed to be themselves. The moment one person has to become smaller so the other feels secure, it's no longer love. "I'll change." "I hope you do. We can still fix this." I gave him a small smile. "I hope you become a better partner someday. It just won't be with me." As I walked toward the hallway, he called after me one last time. "What am I supposed to do now?" I looked back over my shoulder. "Figure out who you are without someone else paying for the life you wanted." Then I walked away. The elevator doors closed, and with them, so did that chapter of my life. Thomas glanced at me. "You okay?" I smiled. "I think I finally stopped mourning a relationship that ended a long time ago." "I'm glad," he said quietly. Later that afternoon, Mr. Peterson called. "I wanted to give you a heads up," he said. "I've officially informed Adrian that he can't stay in the apartment." I take it he wasn't happy. He argued that he'd lived there long enough to have tenant rights. "And?" Mr. Peterson laughed. "I explained that living somewhere rent-free doesn't automatically make you a tenant." "What did he say?" "He spent about 10 minutes telling me I didn't understand the law." I almost felt sorry for Adrian. Almost. By Monday morning, another message arrived. This time it was a photo of court paperwork with a short note attached. "You've left me no choice." I opened the filing and couldn't believe what I was reading. Adrian had taken me to small claims court, demanding compensation for emotional distress, financial abandonment, moving expenses, and property he claimed belonged to both of us. The total nearly made me choke on my coffee. Thomas looked over from the kitchen. "What happened now?" I handed him my phone. He read the first page, then burst out laughing. "He's actually suing you?" "Apparently." "For what?" "For doing exactly what he told me to do." He shook his head. "This might be the only lawsuit I've ever seen where someone's angry because the other person followed instructions." I laughed too, but once the amusement faded, I realized the situation wasn't over. Adrian still believed he was entitled to control the outcome. The only difference now was that he expected a judge to hand that control back to him. The hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. I wasn't anxious about it. If anything, I was curious to see how Adrian planned to convince a court that I'd somehow wronged him by following his own words. My attorney met me outside the courthouse. "Ready?" "I've been ready since the day I rented that moving truck." She smiled. I like that answer. Inside, Adrian was already waiting in the navy suit I'd bought him the previous year. His father sat quietly beside him, looking more uncomfortable than angry. Adrian never looked in my direction. Once the judge entered, Adrian began laying out his case. According to him, I'd illegally forced him out of the apartment, taken property we supposedly owned together, abandoned him financially, and caused severe emotional distress. To support his argument, he even submitted his laminated list of household rules as evidence that he'd simply been trying to create a healthier relationship. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked at him. "Mr. Adrian, were you listed on the lease?" "No." "Did you ever pay rent directly to the landlord?" "We had an arrangement. Please answer the question." No." She made a note before continuing. "Did Ms. Carter ask you to leave the apartment?" "No." "But you asked her to leave?" Adrian hesitated. "Yes." "And you said those words voluntarily?" I was angry. "So you still said them?" "Yes." The judge turned to me. Ms. Carter, who purchased the furniture? My attorney has the receipts. My attorney handed over a folder containing purchase records, bank statements, invoices, and warranty registrations. Every document listed my name as the buyer. Adrian leaned forward. I helped pick the furniture. The judge barely looked up. Helping choose an item doesn't establish ownership. His expression immediately changed. He quickly shifted to another argument, claiming I'd abandoned him financially. The judge frowned. Were you married? No. Was Ms. Carter legally responsible for supporting you? No. Were you employed during the relationship? Yes. Then what legal basis do you have for requesting financial support after the breakup? Adrian opened his mouth but couldn't answer. My attorney stood. Your Honor, we'd also like to submit additional evidence. With the judge's permission, screenshots from Adrian's social media appeared on the courtroom monitor. They showed posts promoting his future relationship coaching business, captions describing his so-called relationship system, and comments where he proudly claimed he'd perfected a method for building the ideal partner. Then came the final screenshot. It was a message he'd sent to one of his friends, explaining that once his coaching business became successful, he planned to leave me and upgrade to someone who better matched his ambitions. The judge read it carefully before looking back at Adrian. Were you planning to end this relationship regardless of what happened? His face went pale. Beside him, his father slowly turned and stared. You never told me that. Adrian didn't respond. For the first time since I'd met him, he had no explanation, no carefully prepared argument, and no clever way to reframe what he'd done. The evidence spoke for itself. The judge closed the file and set her pen down. I have seen no evidence that Ms. Carter unlawfully evicted the plaintiff. She continued. I have seen no evidence that she removed property she did not own. Another page turned. I have seen no legal basis for financial abandonment. One final pause. The plaintiff instructed the defendant to leave the residence. She looked at Adrian. The defendant complied. The judge looked up. Case dismissed. Just like that, every one of Adrian's claims was thrown out. She also ordered him to reimburse $500 for my legal expenses. Outside the courtroom, his father stopped beside me before following his son. I didn't know, he said quietly. I believe you. He gave me a small nod and walked away. Adrian never turned around. Over the next month, I heard bits and pieces about how things had unfolded. Despite everything, Adrian still tried to launch his relationship coaching business. He built a polished website, filmed promotional videos, and even released a $300 online course. Almost no one bought it. Once people connected his name to the lawsuit, the tone online changed. Followers disappeared, skeptical comments replaced praise, and even the yoga studio he visited every week eventually asked him to find somewhere else after several uncomfortable confrontations. The 3 small businesses that had hired him to manage their social media quietly ended their contracts as well. One of those business owners later contacted me, not to talk about the breakup, but because she needed help rebuilding the website Adrian had neglected. Our last consultant got distracted, she said with an embarrassed smile. I knew exactly who she meant, but I simply smiled back and got to work. Eventually, Adrian moved back in with his parents and found a part-time job at a local nutrition store. Mutual friends occasionally mentioned he was seeing someone new from his gym. I genuinely hoped he'd learned enough not to repeat the same mistakes. Not for my sake, for hers. I settled into my new apartment, invited friends over whenever I wanted, and stopped worrying about whether leaving a blanket on the couch or dishes in the sink would start an argument. It turned out life didn't fall apart without someone inspecting every little decision I made. A few months later, I met someone new. Being with him felt effortless. He never questioned how I spent my money or acted as though love came with conditions. As we ate straight from the cartons, he grinned. I guess we'd fail your ex's kitchen inspection. I laughed. Without question. People still ask if I regret leaving. I don't. The hardest part wasn't packing up an apartment. It was accepting that I deserved better than the life I'd convinced myself was normal. Adrian once told me I wouldn't last a week without him keeping my life together. The funny part is that I did. The only thing that disappeared after I left was the life he'd been building on my paycheck.